Do Catholics and Christians worship the same Jesus? The quick answer is no. Here's why. If I were to tell you that God was once a man on another planet, and he was so good that he was then elected to become a god by the Council of Gods, you would think I'm being ridiculous. Unless you're Mormon. If I told you that Jesus was created by that God having physical sex with Mary, you would think I'm ridiculous. Unless you're Mormon. Now, if I told you that Jesus was actually Michael the Archangel, you would think I'm ridiculous. Unless you're a Jehovah's Witness. Now, if I told you that Jesus is not God, he was just a prophet that was preparing the way for another prophet who would come 600 years later, you would think I'm ridiculous. Unless you're Muslim. Now, if I told you that Jesus was just another incarnation of Buddha, you would think I'm ridiculous unless you're a Buddhist. If I told you that Jesus was one of 32 million gods, you would think I'm ridiculous unless you're a Hindu. Now, if I told you that Jesus was not a sufficient sacrifice, that he was not good enough to atone for all sin, you would think I'm ridiculous unless you're a Catholic. Here's why. And here's the thing with that. Most Catholics really truly don't even know what Catholicism teaches. So many of them might even think that's ridiculous because they don't know what their church officially says as doctrine. So, if you remove one attribute of God, or if you add an attribute of God, for example, God is all-knowing, he is omnipotent, he is omnipresent, that means he's everywhere. If you remove any of those from him, he's no longer God. You've created an idol. You've created a false God, such as saying that he was once a man on a different planet, or that Jesus is the creation of God. That creates a false Jesus. That creates an idol. Now, the Catholic Church, they don't teach that Jesus was a sufficient sacrifice. They teach that you have to partake of the Eucharist, that you have to partake of confessing to a priest, and then serving penance by repeating prayers, which is specifically forbidden in Matthew 6. They teach a lot of different things on how they have to work to get to heaven because Jesus wasn't sufficient. They have to do all these things, and then Jesus makes up for it at the end. Maybe. That's very wrong according to the Bible. So real quick in the Bible, we're going to read from Hebrews 10, verses 10 through 14. By this will, we have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all time. Every priest stands daily ministering and offering time after time the same sacrifices which can never take away sins. But he, Jesus, having offered one sacrifice for sins for all time, sat down at the right hand of God, waiting for that time onward until his enemies are made a footstool for his feet. For by one offering he has perfected for all time those who are being sanctified. That's pretty clear. It was by one sacrifice. In the Roman Catholic Catechism, paragraph 1367, it says that the Eucharist is a continual sacrifice of Jesus. This means one of two things: that they are re-sacrificing Jesus over and over 280,000 times a day worldwide, which is actually the official teaching, or that Jesus lied when he said it is finished before he died. If you take one of God's attributes and you apply it to a human, that is also going to remove that attribute from God because God has exclusive attributes. Exclusive means only to him. So if you were to say that, just as an example, that you are all-knowing, you're wrong, you're lying. So if I were to tell you that God isn't the only perfect person, that God isn't the only perfect person when he was, on earth as Jesus, you would think it's ridiculous. Well, the Catholic Church officially teaches that Mary was sinless. That's troublesome because the Bible very clearly states that God is the only one who's good. Mark 10:18 says, "For there is no one good but God." Romans 3 verse 10, "There is no one good, no, not one." And then verse 23 says, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." Now, is God lying? Or did he forget about Mary? Why didn't he separate the two? Jesus was the only one without sin. And the Bible specifically tells us that he was without sin. 2 Corinthians 5:21, it says that God made him, Jesus, who knew no sin, to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. That's very, very simple, very clear. Jesus was without sin. That's repeated multiple times in the Bible. Jesus was the only one born of a virgin. In 1854, the Catholic Church began teaching that Mary was also immaculately conceived. Yes, that recently. And in 1950, they started teaching the bodily assumption of Mary, teaching that she was also assumed to heaven, did not die, because praying to dead people is a sin, and the Catholic Church was trying to cover up for that. But now, let's bounce back to Islam real quick. So in the Quran, Surah 5, verse 72, it says that if you believe that Jesus is God, you will burn in hell for eternity. Well, the Bible teaches that Jesus is God, and there is only one God. Like the Shema, for example, it says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is God, the Lord is one. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. It's true. There is one God, but there's a lot of fake gods. So if we go back to the Roman Catholic Catechism, paragraph 841, it teaches that Muslims and Catholics worship the same God. I guess that's true. They do worship the same God, which is not the God of the Bible. It is not the God that Christians worship. Jesus. These are only a few reasons why there's a distinction between the Catholic idol that they blasphemously call Jesus and the Jesus of the Bible, who is the eternal holy God. If you want more on this subject, there is so much more I can go into on all the different reasons why Jesus is not the same Jesus that they worship in Catholicism. The real Jesus is the eternal God, Yahweh in the flesh. If you liked this video and found it useful, share it. The reason that we're sharing these things, the reason why we're going into depth on stuff that most people don't want to touch, like this, is because we care about you. If you're a Catholic, we want you to become a Christian. We want you to trust in the true God. We don't do this out of hate for you. We do this because we love you, and we don't want you to go to hell. Nabil Qureshi, a very famous Christian apologist, he said that when he was in high school, he was surrounded by people who said that they were Christians. And no one ever asked him if he was saved. They never asked him about Jesus. They never talked to him about God until one girl did. And at the time, he was very, very Muslim. And he knew all these little strategies to refute the things that they said, even if they were inaccurate. And he said in response to this several years later,
So I thought one of two things must be true. Either they don't really believe their faith, or they don't care if I go to hell. If you as a Christian did not ask me if I believed in Jesus, then I believed either you didn't really believe your faith or you didn't care if I went to hell.
we care, we believe, and we want you to have a real relationship with Jesus. We want you to put your faith, your trust in Jesus Christ alone, knowing that Jesus paid the full price for the transgressions that you have crossed across God's law. God bless, and read your Bibles.